After 4 decades of separation, an extraordinary tale was about to unfold in the heart of Tanzania. An elephant named Jabari was unknowingly approaching a reunion with his father, a meeting that would challenge everything we thought we knew about these magnificent creatures. What happened next would leave seasoned wildlife experts in tears and prove that the bonds of family run deeper than we could ever imagine. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. James Matthews stared at the worn photograph in his weathered hands, his eyes fixed on the image of 2 elephants, a massive bull elephant standing protectively next to his tiny calf. The morning sun filtered through the canvas tent at Serengeti Wildlife Reserve as the 68-year-old wildlife photographer struggled to steady his trembling fingers. Could it really be possible? After all these years? The photograph, now faded and creased, had been taken in 1984, just days before a devastating poaching incident had separated the father and son elephants. James had witnessed the tragedy unfold through his camera lens, a moment that had haunted him for 40 years and ultimately shaped his entire career in wildlife conservation. "Mr. Matthews," called Dr. Sarah Kimoto, the reserve's lead researcher, interrupting his thoughts. "The satellite tracking data confirms it. The elephant matching Jabari's unique tusk pattern has entered the northern sector of the reserve." She paused, her expression a mixture of excitement and professional caution. "And what's even more remarkable, he's traveling with the same herd as the elder bull we believe to be his father." James rose from his chair, his joints protesting. The sudden movement. At his age, he shouldn't be getting his hopes up, but he couldn't help it. He'd spent decades documenting elephant family dynamics, and the thought of witnessing this potential reunion was almost too much to bear. "How certain are we?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "These patterns you're seeing, they could be coincidental." But even as he voiced his doubts, James knew the evidence was compelling. The distinctive notch in Jabari's left tusk, captured in countless photographs during his early years, was unmistakable. Sarah spread several thermal imaging photos across the makeshift desk. "The DNA samples we collected last month are conclusive. This is definitely Jabari, and the bull elephant he's approaching shares genetic markers consistent with being his father." "But James," she hesitated, choosing her words carefully, "you need to understand that even if they encounter each other, there's no guarantee they'll recognize one another. The trauma of their separation, the years apart." James nodded, understanding the weight of her words. He'd spent his entire career studying elephant behavior, documenting their incredible capacity for memory and emotional intelligence. But this was unprecedented. A father and son reunion after 4 decades. It seemed almost too extraordinary to believe. The mysterious return of both elephants to the reserve had sparked intense interest in the scientific community. James had been tracking Jabari's movement patterns for months, ever since the first reported sighting. The young calf he'd once photographed was now a magnificent adult bull, his tusks grown long and elegant, his hide bearing the marks of a life lived wild and free. As James packed his camera gear, memories flooded back, the day he'd first photographed. The pair, the father's protective stance, the playful interactions between them. Then came the darker memories, the sound of gunshots, the chaos that ensued, the heart-wrenching sight of the young calf being separated from his father during the poaching incident. James had managed to document the entire tragic event, and his photographs had later helped strengthen anti-poaching laws in the region. The research team has set up observation posts along the northern corridor, Sarah explained, pulling up a digital map on her tablet. If their current trajectories continue, both elephants should converge in the vicinity of the old baobab grove within the next 48 hours. James's heart raced at the possibility. The Baobab Grove, the very location where he'd taken that first photograph so many years ago. Was it possible that some ancient memory was drawing them back to that specific spot? He'd seen enough remarkable things in his career to know that when it came to elephants, nothing was impossible. "I want to be there," James declared, his voice firm despite his age. "I need to see this through, Sarah. I need to know if they remember." Sarah studied him for a moment before nodding. "We'll set up a blind at first light. But James, promise. Me, you'll maintain your distance. These are wild elephants, and if something goes wrong—" "I know," James interrupted softly. "I've spent my life documenting their stories. I know the risks." He carefully tucked the old photograph into his shirt pocket, close to his heart. Tomorrow could bring anything: disappointment, danger, or perhaps a miracle that would challenge everything they thought they knew about elephant cognition and family bonds. Little did James know, the events that would unfold over the next 24 hours would not only change his life, but would also rewrite our understanding of elephant intelligence and emotional memory forever. As dawn broke over the Serengeti Wildlife Reserve, James positioned himself in the observation blind, his camera equipment meticulously arranged before him. The first rays of sunlight painted the savanna in hues of gold and amber, casting long shadows across the landscape he'd come to know so intimately over the decades. Dr. Sarah Kimoto's voice crackled through his earpiece. "Movement detected in the northern quadrant. The younger bull, Jabari, is approximately 3 kilometers from your position and moving steadily south." There was a pause before she added, "The elder bull's herd is maintaining their course from the east. Convergence, still likely within the targeted zone." James adjusted his binoculars, scanning the horizon while his mind drifted back to 1984. He had been a young, idealistic wildlife photographer then, fresh out of university with dreams of documenting African wildlife. His first major assignment had brought him to this very reserve, where he'd encountered the remarkable father-son elephant pair that would change the course of his life. The elder bull, whom local rangers had named Mkuu, meaning chief in Swahili, had been distinctive even then. His right tusk bore unusual markings, created by a long-healed injury that had left subtle ripples in the ivory. His son, Jabari, had inherited a similar pattern, though on his left tusk instead, a detail that had made tracking them both possible after all these years. "You were just like your father even then," James whispered to himself, remembering how the young Jabari had mimicked his father's behaviors, from the way he drank water to how he used his trunk to test the wind. The similarities had been remarkable, making the perfect subjects for James's photographic study of elephant social behavior. A young research assistant named Maya appeared at the blind's entrance, carefully maintaining her stealth as she joined him. "Dr. Kimoto sent me to assist with the documentation," she whispered, setting up additional recording equipment. "I've been studying your work on elephant social structures, Mr. Matthews. Your photographs of Jabari and Mkuu are legendary in the field." James nodded, appreciating her enthusiasm, but keeping his eyes fixed on the horizon. The weight of the old photograph seemed to burn against his chest, where it sat in his shirt pocket. He hadn't shared the full story with many people. The guilt and helplessness he'd felt that tragic day still haunted him. "There was nothing you could have done," Maya said softly, as if reading his thoughts. "The anti-poaching units weren't as organized back then. Your photographs helped change that." James gripped his camera tighter. "I should have done more. I watched through my lens as they were separated, kept shooting even as chaos erupted. Those images sparked outrage and led to stronger protection laws. Yes, but at what cost to them?" He gestured toward the savannah. A father and son torn apart, 40 years of separation. Maya adjusted her headset, listening to incoming reports. The local Maasai communities have been instrumental in tracking both elephants over the years, she explained. They say Maku's herd has been showing unusual behavior lately, breaking from their typical migration patterns, spending more time near the areas where he and Jabari used to roam. The morning air grew warmer as they waited, the silence broken only by distant bird calls and the occasional updates through their earpieces. James found himself holding his breath with each new report of movement, his experienced eyes constantly scanning the landscape for any sign of approaching elephants. Movement spotted, Maya suddenly whispered, pointing to the northwest. Large, bull elephant, matching Jabari's description. Through his telephoto lens, James could make out the distinctive shape of a massive bull elephant moving with purposeful strides across the savannah. Even at this distance, there was no mistaking the unique tusk pattern. This was definitely Jabari, now fully grown and magnificent. He's already larger than his father was, James murmured, making preliminary notes while keeping his camera trained on the approaching elephant. Look at how he carries himself, that same regal bearing Maku had. As they watched, Jabari paused, near a cluster of acacia trees, his trunk raised to the wind. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Something had caught his attention, causing him to become absolutely still, a behavior James had documented countless times in his father, decades ago. Second herd approaching from the east, Dr. Kimoto's voice reported through their earpieces. The elder bull is leading them directly toward your position. Estimated arrival at the observation zone in approximately 20 minutes. James felt his heart race as he realized both elephants were now moving toward the same point, the ancient baobab grove, where he'd first photographed them together all those years ago. Whether by instinct, memory, or mere coincidence, father and son were about to cross paths in the very place where their story had begun. Maya, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, I need you to be ready with the backup cameras. What we're about to witness. It could change everything we think we know about elephant memory and family bonds. The young assistant nodded, her own hands trembling slightly as she double-checked the equipment. The air seemed to grow heavier, with anticipation as they waited, watching as two remarkable journeys, 40 years in the making, were about to intersect in ways no one could predict. The atmosphere in the observation blind crackled with tension as James and Maya watched Jabari's steady approach. Through his viewfinder, James could see every detail of the magnificent bull elephant, the way his muscles rippled beneath his weathered hide, the distinctive notch in his left tusk catching the morning light. But it was the elephant's eyes that held James transfixed. They carried the same gentle intelligence he remembered from 40 years ago. Second herd, now visible on the eastern horizon, Dr. Kimoto's voice reported through their earpieces. Maku is clearly identifiable at the front. His behavior appears unusual. There was a pause before she continued. He's broken away from the herd's formation, moving independently now. James adjusted his camera settings with practiced precision, though his hands trembled slightly. Through the telephoto lens, he could now make out the approaching form of Maku. The years had left their mark on the elder bull. His hide was more weathered, crossed with the subtle scars of a long life in the wild, but he still moved with the same commanding presence James remembered. Look at their trajectories, Maya whispered, pointing to the digital tracking display. They're both heading directly for the baobab grove. It's almost as if they remember, James finished softly, unable to take his eyes off the unfolding scene. The ancient baobab tree stood as a silent sentinel, its massive trunk and sprawling branches casting complex shadows across the savanna floor. It was here, 4 decades ago, that James had captured some of his most powerful images of the father and son together. Through his headset, James could hear the increasing excitement in the research team's communications. Various observation posts were reporting unusual behaviors in both elephants. Changes in their gait, frequent pausing to test the air, signs that suggested growing awareness of each other's presence. Movement in the southern herd, another voice crackled through the communication system. Several younger elephants appear to be responding to Jabari's presence, possible recognition signals. James watched as Jabari suddenly stopped, his trunk raised high in the air. The bull elephant's ears spread wide, moving slowly back and forth as he processed the scents and sounds carried on the morning breeze. It was a behavior James had documented countless times in his studies. Elephants using their incredible sensory capabilities to gather information about their environment. His heart rate is elevated, Dr. Kimoto reported, monitoring the data from Jabari's tracking collar. Respiration and temperature readings suggest heightened awareness. Whatever he's sensing, it's triggering a strong physiological response. Maya quickly adjusted the additional cameras, ensuring every angle was covered. "Mr. Matthews," she whispered urgently, "look at Maku's approach pattern. He's mirroring Jabari's movements exactly." James nodded, his throat tight with emotion, as he watched the two bulls moving in an almost synchronized dance, though still separated by considerable distance. The similarity in their behaviors was striking, the way they tested the air, how they placed their feet, even the subtle shifts in their posture. It was as if some ancient memory was guiding them both. Distance between subjects now under 1 kilometer, came another update. Both elephants showing increased signs of agitation. Be prepared for any sudden movements. The warning was hardly necessary. James had spent enough time around elephants to read their body language instinctively. But what he was seeing now didn't suggest aggression or threat. Instead, there was an almost palpable sense of anticipation in both bulls' behavior. "Extraordinary," Maya breathed, watching the digital readouts. Their biological markers are almost synchronized. Heart rates, respiratory patterns. It's like they're responding to each other even before visual contact. The sun had climbed higher in the sky, casting shorter shadows and intensifying the heat. Small groups of zebra and wildebeest that had been grazing nearby began to move away, sensing the growing tension in the air. Even the birds seemed to quiet their calls, as if nature itself was holding its breath. James found himself unconsciously touching the old photograph in his pocket as he watched Maku emerge from behind a cluster of acacia trees. The elder bull moved with deliberate steps, his massive head swaying gently as he approached the baobab grove. Despite his age, there was power in every movement, a dignity that commanded respect. "All teams maintain absolute silence," Dr. Kimoto ordered through the communication system. "We're about to witness something unprecedented in recorded elephant behavior. Every detail matters." Through his viewfinder, James could see Jabari clearly now, standing motionless near the baobab tree. The younger bull's posture had changed subtly. There was a tension in his frame, an alertness that suggested he sensed something significant was about to occur. His trunk remained raised, sampling the air with increasing frequency. The distance between father and son had narrowed to less than half a kilometer. Any moment now, they would have visual contact. James felt his heart pounding as he documented every second, knowing he was about to witness either a moment of extraordinary recognition or something else entirely. The scientific community would scrutinize every frame, every detail of what was about to unfold. "Movement from both subjects," Maya reported in a whisper. "They're about to enter direct line of sight." James held his breath, his finger steady on the camera's shutter release. 40 years of separation, of lives lived in parallel but apart, were about to converge under the ancient baobab tree. What happened next would either confirm everything he believed about elephant memory and emotional bonds, or challenge it completely. The moment of first visual contact between father and son occurred with an almost supernatural stillness. Through his viewfinder, James captured the exact instant when Jabari and Maku's eyes met across the savannah. Both elephants froze in their tracks, their massive forms becoming as motionless as the ancient baobab that stood witness to their reunion. "Remarkable," Dr. Kimoto's voice whispered through the headsets, both subjects showing immediate physiological responses. Heart rates elevated but synchronized, no signs of aggression or territorial display. James barely heard the commentary as he focused on capturing every nuance of the encounter. Through his lens, he could see Jabari's trunk lowering slowly, his ears spreading wide, not in threat, but in what appeared to be intense focus. Maku's response mirrored his son's with a precision that seemed beyond coincidence. Maya's fingers flew across her tablet, documenting every detail. "Their postures are identical," she murmured. "It's like looking at reflections across time. The same behaviors you documented in your early photographs, Mr. Matthews." The distance between the two bulls had shrunk to roughly 100 meters, yet neither made any move to close the gap further. Instead, they began a series of subtle movements that James recognized from his years of research. Gentle trunk waves, soft ear flaps, barely perceptible weight shifts that conveyed volumes of information to those who knew how to read elephant body language. Multiple observation posts reporting unusual vocalizations came another update through their earpieces. Subsonic frequencies detected, they're communicating. James adjusted his camera settings to capture the increasingly intricate interaction. He had documented countless elephant encounters over his career, but this was different. There was an almost ceremonial quality to their movements, as if father and son were performing a dance choreographed by nature itself. "Look at their trunks," Maya whispered excitedly. "The matching patterns in their movements, it's almost like they're remembering," James finished, his voice thick with emotion. Through his viewfinder, he watched as Jabari took a hesitant step forward, his trunk extended slightly. The gesture was tentative, almost questioning, and startlingly similar to behaviors James had photographed 4 decades ago when Jabari was a calf, meeting new members of the herd. Maku's response was equally measured. The elder bull shifted his weight forward, his own trunk raising in what elephant researchers recognized as a greeting gesture. But there was something more in his movement, a gentleness that seemed at odds with his imposing size. "All teams, maintain position," Dr. Kimoto ordered quietly. "We're observing behaviors that have never been documented in elephants separated for this length of time. Every detail must be recorded." The savannah had fallen into an almost unnatural silence, as if the surrounding wildlife sensed the gravity of what was unfolding. Even the ever-present African wind seemed to have stilled, leaving only the soft sounds of camera shutters documenting this extraordinary moment. James found himself holding his breath as Jabari took another step forward, then another. Each movement was deliberate, measured, his eyes never leaving his father's face. Through the telephoto lens, James could see every detail of the younger bull's expression, the subtle movements of his eyes, the gentle twitching of his trunk, the almost imperceptible shifts in his massive ears. "Their biological markers are still synchronized," Maya reported, her voice barely above a whisper. "Heart rates, breathing patterns. It's as if they're physically connected somehow." The distance between father and son had shrunk to mere meters now. Maku stood his ground, his presence commanding but not threatening. His head tilted slightly, a gesture James had seen countless times in his early photographs, a movement that had often preceded moments of affection between the pair. Movement in the observing herd, came a quick update. Several elephants showing signs of recognition behavior, possible memory triggers in the group. James switched camera bodies smoothly, ensuring he captured every angle of what was unfolding. The morning sun had risen higher, casting definition to every wrinkle and scar on both elephants' hides, physical records of the 40 years they had spent apart. Suddenly, Jabari let out a soft rumble, a sound so low it was felt more than heard. The vibration carried across the savannah, setting the scientific equipment trembling in its cases. Maku's response was immediate, a deeper rumble that seemed to make the very earth beneath their feet resonate. Incredible frequency matching in their vocalizations, Dr. Kimoto reported, her professional tone barely masking her excitement. These are not typical greeting or territorial calls. The pattern suggests. She never finished her observation. At that moment, Jabari closed the final distance between himself and his father, extending his trunk to touch Maku's face. The cape gesture was so gentle, so filled with apparent recognition, that James heard Maya stifle a gasp beside him. Time seemed to stand still as father and son made physical contact for the first time in 40 years. Through his lens, James captured the moment their trunks intertwined, a greeting that spoke of memories deeper than time, of bonds that even 4 decades couldn't sever. The emotional intensity of the reunion suddenly shifted as Maku's massive frame swayed forward, closing the remaining space between them. The elder bull's movement was decisive but gentle, displaying none of the territorial aggression common among male elephants. Instead, his approach carried a different energy, one of recognition, of familial connection that transcended time. All vital signs remain elevated but stable, Dr. Kimoto reported through the communication system, both subjects showing unprecedented levels of oxytocin release. These are typically bonding hormone patterns we only see in immediate family, groups, or long-term herd members. James's camera shutter clicked rapidly as he documented the unfolding scene. Through his lens, he watched as Maku raised his trunk to Jabari's face, gently touching the distinctive notch in his son's left tusk, the very feature that had helped researchers track him over the decades. The gesture seemed almost like confirmation, as if the elder bull was verifying what his other senses had already told him. "Maya," James whispered urgently, "are you getting this? The way he's examining the tusk mark. It's exactly how he used to check Jabari for injuries when he was a calf." The young researcher nodded, her fingers flying across her tablet. "The behavioral parallels are extraordinary. It's as if 40 years haven't passed at all. Look at their positioning. They're even standing at the same angles I've seen in your old photographs." The 2 bulls had begun a series of gentle trunk interactions, their movements becoming more fluid and natural with each passing moment. Jabari's initial hesitancy had melted away, replaced by what appeared to be growing confidence in the connection being re-established. "Movement in the observing herd," came another update. "Several of the younger elephants are showing interest. Permission to document their approach?" "Granted," Dr. Kimoto responded, "but maintain distance protocols. We can't risk disrupting this interaction." Through his viewfinder, James could see members of Maku's herd slowly moving closer, led by what appeared to be some of the older females. Their approach was cautious but purposeful, their behavior suggesting curiosity rather than concern. "The herd's reaction is fascinating," Maya observed quietly. "Look at how the older females are positioning themselves. It's almost like they're forming a protective circle, but not to defend against Jabari. It's more like they're creating a safe space for this reunion." James nodded, understanding the significance. Elephant herds were known for their complex social structures and emotional intelligence, but this level of apparent understanding and support for a reunion was unprecedented in scientific literature. Suddenly, Jabari let out another low rumble, different from his earlier vocalizations. This sound carried a different quality, lighter, almost playful. To James's amazement, Maku responded with a similar call, one that seemed to resonate with memories of their past interactions. These vocalizations, Dr. Kimoto's voice crackled through their headsets, her tone filled with barely contained excitement. They're matching the frequency patterns we've only seen in parent-infant communications. The fact that they can still produce and recognize these calls after 40 years. Her voice trailed off as something extraordinary began to unfold. Jabari had started to move in a distinctive pattern around his father, his steps carrying a rhythm that seemed familiar to James. With a jolt of recognition, he realized he had documented this same behavior 4 decades ago. It was a play pattern unique to their relationship, a sort of game they had often engaged in. "Mr. Matthews," Maya whispered, her voice trembling slightly, "isn't this the same movement sequence from your 84 photographs, the one you described as their personal greeting ritual?" James could only nod, too moved to speak, as he watched Maku respond to his son's invitation. The elder bull began to mirror Jabari's movements, their massive forms engaging in what appeared to be a remembered dance. It was both beautiful and profound, two beings rediscovering a language of movement and memory that time had not erased. The observing herd had drawn closer now, forming a loose circle around the reunited pair. Some of the younger elephants were showing signs of excitement, their trunks raised and ears flapping in response to the energy of the moment. Multiple cases of mirror neuron activation detected in the herd members, came another update. The younger elephants are learning from this interaction, recording these behavioral patterns in real time. James continued to document every moment, knowing that what they were witnessing would challenge and expand scientific understanding of elephant cognition and emotional memory. But beyond the scientific significance, he felt privileged to witness something deeply personal, a reunion that spoke to the enduring power of family bonds across time and distance. Through his lens, he watched as father and son continued their synchronized movements, their trunks intertwined in gestures of recognition and affection. The morning sun cast their shadows long across the savannah, merging them into a single shape beneath the ancient baobab tree, a visual metaphor for the reconvergence of their life paths after 40 years apart. The extraordinary reunion was suddenly interrupted by an unexpected display of behavior from Maku. The elder bull gently wrapped his trunk around Jabari's and with a deliberate motion that left the research team breathless, began leading his son toward the ancient baobab tree, the very spot where James had photographed them 4 decades ago. "All teams maintain current positions," Dr. Kimoto instructed through the communication system. "They're moving toward the original documentation site. This could be significant." James adjusted his camera position, his heart racing as he watched the pair move with synchronized steps. Through his viewfinder, he could see every detail of their interaction. The gentle way Maku guided his son, the willing trust in Jabari's response. It was a dance of mutual understanding that seemed to defy everything they knew about elephant behavior after long-term separation. "The behavioral patterns are remarkable," Maya whispered, her fingers flying across her tablet. "Look at how they're matching each other's pace, the way their trunk movements mirror one another. It's like they're speaking a private language." As they approached the baobab, Maku released his gentle hold on Jabari's trunk and moved to stand beside the massive tree trunk. What happened next left even the most seasoned researchers stunned. The elder bull began to trace patterns in the bark with his trunk, movements that seemed deliberate and purposeful. "Dr. Kimoto," Maya called softly into her headset. "Are you seeing this? He's touching specific areas of the tree, areas where our historical records show they used to rest together." "Confirmed," came the response. "The pattern recognition team is documenting every movement. This suggests a level of spatial memory we've never recorded in elephants separated for this long." James watched through his lens as Jabari observed his father's actions, his own trunk rising to explore the ancient bark. The younger bull's movements became increasingly animated, as if each touch awakened dormant memories from his early years. "Look at their ears," James murmured, noticing a subtle change in both elephants' behavior. "They're both picking up something." "We can't hear." Almost on cue, Dr. Kimoto's voice crackled through their headsets. "We're detecting complex infrasonic communications. The frequency patterns are unprecedented. They're producing vocalizations that match recordings from 40 years ago, but with new variations." The surrounding herd had maintained their protective circle, but now several of the older females were showing increased interest. In the tree-touching ritual, their own trunks were raised, sampling the air and responding to the subsonic conversation between father and son. The herd's reaction suggests they recognize the significance of this interaction, Maya noted, her voice filled with wonder. They're not just witnessing a reunion, they're learning from it, recording these behaviors in their own memory banks. Suddenly, Maku stepped back from the tree and turned to face his son fully. The elder bull's posture changed subtly, taking on a quality that James recognized from his earliest photographs, the stance of a father preparing to teach his calf something important. "Movement pattern shift detected," came an update from another observation post. "The elder bull appears to be initiating a known teaching behavior." James held his breath as he watched Maku demonstrate a complex trunk movement, one that seemed to involve touching specific points on the baobab's bark in a particular sequence. To everyone's amazement, Jabari immediately responded, matching his father's pattern with remarkable precision. "It's a memory test," Dr. Kimoto breathed through the communication system. "He's recreating a teaching moment from Jabari's infancy. The implications for long-term memory retention in elephants are staggering." The interaction continued to evolve as Maku led Jabari in what appeared to be a remembered series of movements around the baobab. Each step, each trunk gesture seemed laden with meaning, as if they were retracing the patterns of their shared past. "The younger elephants in the herd are mirroring their movements," Maya observed, pointing to where several adolescent bulls had begun to copy the intricate dance of trunk and step. "This isn't just a reunion, it's becoming a transmission of generational knowledge." James continued documenting every moment, knowing that what they were witnessing would revolutionize their understanding of elephant cognition and emotional memory. The morning sun had climbed higher, casting dappled shadows through the baobab's branches that seemed to dance with the movements of father and son below. "All teams, prepare for extended observation," Dr. Kimoto instructed. "What we're seeing here goes beyond simple recognition. This is active recall and demonstration of learned behaviors across a 40-year gap. Every detail must be recorded." The air seemed charged with emotion as Maku and Jabari continued their synchronized exploration of the baobab, their trunks occasionally intertwining in gestures of affection and reassurance. The surrounding herd maintained their protective circle, their presence adding another layer of significance to the unfolding scene. Through his viewfinder, James could see the subtle changes in both bulls' expressions, the gentle softening around their eyes, the relaxed set of their ears, the easy comfort in their proximity to each other. These were the indicators of deep trust and recognition that no scientific instrument could measure, but that his decades of experience told him were unmistakable. "They're not just remembering each other," James whispered, more to himself than to Maya. "They're remembering who they were together, who they are to each other. This isn't just about genetic memory or learned behaviors. This is about something deeper." The extraordinary scene beneath the baobab tree suddenly shifted as Jabari made an unexpected move that caught everyone by surprise. The younger bull stepped back from his father and let out a series of short, playful trumpet calls, sounds that James instantly recognized from his earliest recordings of their interactions. "Those vocalizations," Maya whispered excitedly, "they're identical to the play initiation calls you documented when Jabari was a calf. The frequency pattern is exactly the same." Through his viewfinder, James watched as Munku's entire demeanor changed in response to his son's invitation. The elder bull's ears spread wide, and his trunk curled in what elephant researchers recognized as a gesture of joy. What followed left even the most seasoned observers speechless. "All teams, maintain absolute focus," Dr. Komoto's voice crackled through their headsets. "We're witnessing behavior that completely challenges our understanding of elephant memory and social bonding." Munku had begun to engage in what could only be described as play behavior, something extremely rare in elder bulls, particularly in the wild. He gently nudged Jabari with his trunk, initiating a game that James had documented countless times 4 decades ago. It was a simple but distinctive routine, where father and son would take turns hiding their trunks behind trees and finding each other. "The spatial patterns are identical," Maya noted, her fingers flying across her tablet. "They're recreating the exact same game, using the same movements, the same positions relative to the baobab. It's as if 40 years haven't passed at all." James's camera clicked rapidly as he captured every moment of the interaction. Through his lens, he could see the joy radiating from both elephants, their eyes bright, their movements becoming more animated with each passing minute. The surrounding herd had responded to the playful energy, several younger elephants showing increased interest in the interaction. "Remarkable oxidation patterns appearing in both subjects," came another update. "These are typically only seen in moments of extreme positive emotional response. Both bulls are experiencing levels of joy comparable to what we see in parent-infant reunions." The game evolved as Jabari began adding new elements to their played-out memories. He would mirror his father's movements, but then add a unique twist, creating a beautiful blend of remembered patterns and new expressions. Munku responded with equal creativity, showing an adaptability that defied his age. "Look at how they're building on their shared memory," Maya observed. "They're not just recreating the past. They're creating something new together. It's like they're bridging the 40-year gap through play." The morning sun had risen higher, casting shorter shadows across the savannah, but neither elephant showed any sign of tiring. Their game had drawn an increasing audience, not just from the research team, but from other wildlife as well. A group of giraffes had paused their browsing to observe the unusual spectacle, their long necks craned in curiosity. "Multiple species, showing interest in the interaction," Dr. Komoto noted. "The behavioral display is significant enough to attract attention across species boundaries. This suggests the emotional content is recognizable even outside elephant social structures." James continued documenting every moment, but his scientific objectivity was being challenged by the pure emotion of what he was witnessing. Through his lens, he watched as father and son engaged in an elaborate dance of memory and discovery, each movement laden with meaning and joy. "The vocalization patterns are evolving," came another update. "They're creating new harmonic structures based on their remembered calls. This suggests not just memory retention, but active adaptation and development of their communication." The play session reached a new level when Munku initiated a familiar game involving water. Despite the absence of a water source, both bulls went through the motions of their old splashing routine, their trunks moving through the air in perfect synchronization. It was as if they were performing a choreographed dance from memory, each step and gesture precise and meaningful. They're demonstrating episodic memory, Maya whispered in awe. Not just recognizing each other, but actively recreating specific moments from their shared past. This goes beyond anything we've documented in elephant behavior. The surrounding herd had begun to participate in their own way, forming a more intimate circle around the playing pair. Some of the older females were making soft, rumbling sounds that seemed to encourage and support the interaction. The younger elephants watched intently, as if studying and learning from this extraordinary display of familial bonding. James found himself touching the old photograph in his pocket as he continued to document the scene. The joy and playfulness he was witnessing now perfectly matched the images he had captured 4 decades ago, proving that some bonds truly were timeless. "Dr. Kimoto," Maya called softly into her headset. "The younger elephants are starting to mimic some of the play patterns. Should we expand our documentation focus?" "Affirmative," came the response. "This is becoming a multi-generational learning event. The implications for our understanding of elephant social learning and memory transmission are extraordinary." The morning continued to unfold with father and son lost in their own world of rediscovered joy, their play session becoming more elaborate and expressive with each passing moment. Their trunks moved in perfect harmony, their bodies swaying to some ancient rhythm that only they could hear. Through it all, James kept shooting, knowing that what he was capturing would not only revolutionize scientific understanding, but would also tell a story of love, memory, and the unbreakable bonds between parent and child, a story that transcended species and time itself. The playful interaction between father and son was suddenly interrupted by an unexpected development that made every researcher hold their breath. A younger bull elephant from the observing herd began approaching the pair, his posture displaying clear signs of challenge. The bull was known to the research team, a dominant male they had named Keto, notorious for his aggressive tendencies toward older bulls. "All teams on alert." Dr. Kimoto's voice crackled urgently through the communication system. "Subject Keto is displaying pre-aggressive behavior patterns. Maintain documentation, but be prepared for rapid situation change." James kept his camera, trained on the unfolding scene, his experienced eyes noting every subtle shift in body language between the 3 elephants. Through his viewfinder, he watched as Maku's posture changed instantly, the playful demeanor vanishing as he shifted to position himself between Keto and Jabari. "Remarkable protective response," Maya whispered, her fingers flying across her tablet. "Maku's immediately reverted to paternal defense behaviors. Look at how he's angling his tusks. It's exactly the same positioning you documented when he protected Jabari from predators 40 years ago." The tension in the air was palpable as Keto continued his approach, his ears spread wide in a display of dominance. The younger bull was in his prime, his massive frame carrying the scars of previous victories in territorial disputes. Yet something about this confrontation felt different. Multiple biochemical markers spiking in all 3 subjects came an update through their headsets. Keto's aggression signals are present, but there's something unusual in his movement patterns. James watched intently as Jabari responded to the situation. Instead of backing away, the middle-aged bull moved forward to stand shoulder to shoulder with his father. The synchronization in their movements was remarkable. 2 generations of bulls presenting a unified front against a potential threat. "This is unprecedented." Dr. Kimoto's voice was filled with barely contained excitement. "We're seeing cooperative defense behavior between recently reunited family members. The coordination in their responses suggests immediate recall of protective patterns." Keto had stopped his advance, seemingly confused by the united front. Before him, his trunk rose repeatedly, testing the air as he processed the unusual situation. The young bull's aggressive posture began to waver as he faced not just one, but two experienced bulls working in perfect harmony. "Look at their trunks," Maya pointed out. "Maku and Jabari are producing matching infrasonic calls. They're communicating with each other and sending a unified message to Quito." The surrounding herd had gone completely still, all eyes fixed on the confrontation. Even the usually restless younger elephants stood motionless, as if sensing the significance of what was unfolding. Hormone levels shifting in all subjects. Another update came through. Quito's aggression markers are decreasing. Something in their combined response is affecting his behavior. Through his lens, James captured the moment when Quito's demeanor suddenly changed. The younger bull's ears relaxed, and his trunk lowered in what appeared to be a gesture of submission. But what happened next was even more extraordinary. "Visual documentation priority," Dr. Kimoto instructed. "Quito's displaying learning behavior we've never seen in a challenging male." The younger bull had begun to mirror some of the gentle movements he had observed between Maku and Jabari earlier. His aggressive stance had completely dissolved, replaced by what appeared to be curiosity and a desire to understand the powerful bond he had witnessed. "It's like watching real-time social learning," Maya observed, her voice filled with wonder. "He's not just backing down from a challenge, he's actually trying to integrate into their behavioral pattern." James continued shooting as Maku and Jabari responded to Quito's change in demeanor. The father-son pair maintained their united front, but softened their defensive posture. "Affirmative," came the response. "This is becoming a multi-generational learning event. The implications for our understanding of elephant social learning and memory transmission are extraordinary." The morning continued to unfold with father and son lost in their own world of rediscovered joy, their play session becoming more elaborate and expressive with each passing moment. Their trunks moved in perfect harmony, their bodies swaying to some ancient rhythm that only they could hear. Through it all, James kept shooting, knowing that what he was capturing would not only revolutionize scientific understanding, but would also tell a story of love, memory, and the unbreakable bonds between parent and child, a story that transcended species and time itself. The playful interaction between father and son was suddenly interrupted by an unexpected development that made every researcher hold their breath. A younger bull elephant from the observing herd began approaching the pair, his posture displaying clear signs of challenge. The bull was known to the research team, a dominant male they had named Quito, notorious for his aggressive tendencies toward older bulls. "All teams on alert," Dr. Kimoto's voice crackled urgently through the communication system. "Subject Quito is displaying pre-aggressive behavior patterns. Maintain documentation, but be prepared for rapid situation change." James kept his camera trained on the unfolding scene, his experienced eyes noting every subtle shift in body language between the three elephants. Through his viewfinder, he watched as Maku's posture changed instantly, the playful demeanor vanishing as he shifted to position himself between Quito and Jabari. "Remarkable protective response," Maya whispered, her fingers flying across her tablet. "Maku's immediately reverted to paternal defense behaviors. Look at how he's angling his tusks. It's exactly the same positioning you documented when he protected Jabari from predators 40 years ago." The tension in the air was palpable as Quito continued his approach, his ears spread wide in a display of dominance. The younger bull was in his prime, his massive frame carrying the scars of previous victories in territorial disputes. Yet something about this confrontation felt different. Multiple biochemical markers spiking in all three subjects came an update through their headsets. Quito's aggression signals are present, but there's something unusual in his movement patterns. James watched intently as Jabari responded to the situation. Instead of backing away, The middle-aged bull moved forward to stand shoulder to shoulder with his father. The synchronization in their movements was remarkable. Two generations of bulls presenting a unified front against a potential threat. "This is unprecedented." Dr. Kimoto's voice was filled with barely contained excitement. "We're seeing cooperative defense behavior between recently reunited family members. The coordination in their responses suggests immediate recall of protective patterns." Quito had stopped his advance, seemingly confused by the united front. Before him, his trunk rose repeatedly, testing the air as he processed the unusual situation. The young bull's aggressive posture began to waver as he faced not just one, but two experienced bulls working in perfect harmony. "Look at their trunks," Maya pointed out. "Maku and Jabari are producing matching infrasonic calls. They're communicating with each other and sending a unified message to Quito." The surrounding herd had gone completely still, all eyes fixed on the confrontation. Even the usually restless younger elephant stood motionless, as if sensing the significance of what was unfolding. Hormone levels shifting in all subjects. Another update came through. Quito's aggression markers are decreasing. Something in their combined response is affecting his behavior. Through his lens, James captured the moment when Quito's demeanor suddenly changed. The younger bull's ears relaxed, and his trunk lowered in what appeared to be a gesture of submission. But what happened next was even more extraordinary. "Visual documentation priority," Dr. Kimoto instructed. "Quito's displaying learning behavior we've never seen in a challenging male." The younger bull had begun to mirror some of the gentle movements he had observed between Maku and Jabari earlier. His aggressive stance had completely dissolved, replaced by what appeared to be curiosity and a desire to understand the powerful bond he had witnessed. "It's like watching real-time social learning," Maya observed, her voice filled with wonder. "He's not just backing down from a challenge, he's actually trying to integrate into their behavioral pattern." James continued shooting as Maku and Jabari responded to Quito's change in demeanor. The father-son pair maintained their united front, but softened their defensive posture. Maku, in particular, seemed to be demonstrating something to the younger bull, a series of trunk movements that appeared to be both a correction and an invitation. "The older females are responding," came another update. "They're moving to create a social circle that includes Quito. This is turning into a teaching moment rather than a confrontation." The morning air was filled with the soft rumbles of elephants communicating, their complex social dynamics playing out in ways that challenged everything researchers thought they knew about elephant behavior. What had started as a potential conflict had transformed into something entirely different, a moment of multi-generational learning and social bonding. "Dr. Kimoto," Maya called softly, "should we expand our focus to document the herd's response? The behavioral ripple effect is fascinating." "Affirmative," came the reply. "What we're seeing here goes beyond simple conflict resolution. This is sophisticated social modeling being transmitted across multiple generations." James watched through his viewfinder as Quito was gradually integrated into the group's dynamics, the young bull's aggressive energy transforming into something more controlled and purposeful. It was as if Maku and Jabari's reunion had created a template for a new kind of social interaction, one that emphasized connection over confrontation. The morning sun had risen higher, casting shorter shadows across the savannah as the three bulls began a kind of ceremonial movement pattern together. It was a powerful demonstration of how quickly elephant social structures could adapt and evolve, especially when guided by the wisdom of experienced elders. The atmosphere at the observation site shifted dramatically as dark clouds began gathering on the horizon, bringing an unexpected element to the already extraordinary morning. The approaching weather system seemed to trigger a new set of behaviors in the assembled elephants, particularly in Maku and Jabari. Weather front moving in from the northwest, Dr. Kimoto reported through the communication system. Barometric pressure dropping rapidly. All teams, prepare weather protective equipment for your gear. James watched through his lens as Maku's demeanor changed subtly. The elder bull's trunk raised higher, testing the air with increased frequency. Through decades of observation, James knew that elephants possessed an almost supernatural ability to predict and respond to weather changes. "Maya," he whispered, "note the change in their positioning. Remember what I documented about their behavior during storms 40 years ago." The young researcher nodded eagerly, her fingers flying across her tablet. "According to your field and notes, Maku would always guide Jabari to specific sheltered locations during adverse weather. Are you thinking he might—" Her voice trailed off as Maku began doing exactly that, guiding his son with gentle trunk touches toward a specific cluster of trees near the baobab. The movement was so familiar that James felt a surge of emotion as he documented it. It was the same protective behavior he had photographed countless times during Jabari's infancy. "Extraordinary weather response patterns emerging," Dr. Kimoto's voice crackled through their headsets, both bulls showing synchronized movement consistent with storm preparation behavior. The memory retention here is remarkable. The darker clouds were moving in quickly now, bringing with them the distinct scent of approaching rain. The surrounding herd had begun to respond as well, with the older females guiding younger members toward sheltered areas. But all eyes remained, fixed on Maku and Jabari's interaction. "Look at their trunk movements," Maya observed quietly. "Maku's teaching Jabari something about the weather. See how he's pointing his trunk towards specific cloud formations." Through his viewfinder, James captured the intricate communication between father and son. Maku's movements were deliberate and instructive, demonstrating what appeared to be weather-reading behaviors. Jabari watched intently, his own trunk moving in mirror patterns as he learned from his father's wisdom. Multiple observation posts reporting similar teaching behaviors throughout the herd came another update. The knowledge transfer is spreading. Younger elephants are mimicking these weather-reading positions. The first distant rumble of thunder rolled across the savannah, causing a ripple of movement through the assembled elephants. But rather than showing signs of distress, both Maku and Jabari remained calm, their presence seeming to reassure the rest of the herd. "Hormone levels stable in both subjects," Dr. Kimoto reported. "No stress markers despite the approaching storm. They're displaying advanced weather adaptation behaviors we typically only see in long-established family groups." James adjusted his camera settings to account for the changing light as he continued documenting the scene. Through his lens, he watched as Maku and Jabari coordinated their movements with remarkable precision, guiding younger members of the herd toward the shelter of the tree cluster. "The social dynamics are shifting," Maya noted, her voice filled with excitement. "They're not just father and son now, they're becoming joint leaders. Look at how the herd is responding to their combined guidance." The first heavy drops of rain began to fall, creating a rhythmic pattern on the canopy above the observation blind. The elephants had arranged themselves in a protective formation, with Maku and Jabari positioning themselves on the windward side of the group, their massive bodies providing additional shelter for the younger members. Recording multiple infrasonic communications came another update. The frequency patterns suggest they're sharing some form of weather-related information throughout the herd. The complexity of the vocalizations is unprecedented. Lightning flashed across the darkened sky, followed by a crash of thunder that seemed to shake the earth itself. Yet the elephant herd remained remarkably calm, their behavior guided by the steady presence of the reunited father and son. The younger bulls, including Keto, are adopting their protective positioning, Maya observed. This isn't just about weather protection, they're learning advanced herd leadership behaviors in real time. James watched as Maku demonstrated a particular trunk position to Jabari, who then repeated it for the benefit of the younger elephants. It was a beautiful example of generational knowledge being passed down and then immediately shared with the broader community. Document every detail of this knowledge transfer, Dr. Kimoto instructed through the communication system. What we're seeing here is a perfect example of how elephant social structures adapt and evolve through experienced leadership. The storm continued to intensify, but within their sheltered position, the elephant herd had created a pocket of calm. Maku and Jabari worked in perfect harmony, their years of separation seemingly forgotten as they fell into the natural rhythm of protecting and guiding their extended family. Through his viewfinder, James captured the profound beauty of the moment. Father and son, reunited after 40 years, now sharing their combined wisdom to ensure the safety and survival of their herd. It was a powerful testament to the enduring nature of elephant family bonds and their incredible capacity for memory and adaptation. As the storm began to ease, the gathering darkness gave way to shafts of brilliant sunlight piercing through the clouds, creating an almost ethereal atmosphere around the elephant herd. The natural light show seemed to trigger yet another remarkable phase in Maku and Jabari's reunion, one that left the research team in awe. Atmospheric conditions are creating unique lighting phenomena, Dr. Kimoto noted through the communications system. All teams, adjust your documentation equipment accordingly. What's occurring now deserves optimal visual recording. James watched through his lens as Maku and Jabari emerged from their sheltered position, their wet hides glistening in the dramatic post-storm light. The father and son moved with a synchronization that seemed even more pronounced than before, as if the shared experience of weathering the storm had deepened their reconnection. "Maya," James whispered, "are you seeing this? The way they're moving, it's exactly like the post-storm behavior I documented in '84. But there's something more happening here." The young researcher nodded enthusiastically, her eyes fixed on her monitoring equipment. Their biological markers are showing fascinating patterns. It's as if the storm experience has triggered another layer of memory response. Through his viewfinder, James captured the moment when Maku initiated what appeared to be a unique post-storm ritual. The elder bull began moving his trunk in specific patterns through the rain-soaked air, creating what looked like deliberate designs in the mist that still hung in the atmosphere. "Remarkable behavioral display emerging," Dr. Kimoto's voice crackled with excitement. "This appears to be a previously undocumented form of post-storm communication. All teams maintain complete observation protocols." Jabari watched his father's movements intently before beginning to mirror them, adding his own variations to the intricate trunk patterns. The two bulls moved in what appeared to be a choreographed dance, their massive forms creating shadows that played across the rain-drenched savannah. "The hormone analysis is extraordinary," came another update. "Both subjects are showing elevated levels of oxytocin and other bonding markers. The shared experience of the storm seems to have deepened their emotional connection." Maya's fingers flew across her tablet as she documented every detail. "Look at how the younger elephants are responding," she whispered. "They're forming a circle around Maku and Jabari, almost like an audience at a teaching session." The post-storm air was filled with a mixture of earth and rain scents, creating what elephant researchers knew was a perfect environment for scent-based communication. Through his lens, James watched as both bulls used their trunks to sample the enriched air, their movements suggesting they were sharing some form of olfactory information. "Multiple sensory exchanges occurring," Dr. Kimoto reported. The storm appears to have created optimal conditions for complex social learning. The herd's response patterns indicate this is evolving into a significant knowledge-sharing event. Ding. The sunlight continued to break through the clouds in dramatic rays, highlighting the water droplets that still clung to the elephant's bristled hides. Mkuu and Jabari had begun moving toward a large puddle that had formed near the baobab tree, their steps perfectly matched in rhythm and purpose. "They're approaching the water source," Maya noted excitedly. "Based on your historical documentation, Mr. Matthews, isn't this where—" "Yes," James interrupted softly, his camera already focused on the spot. "This is where they used to play after storms. Watch carefully. What happens next could be extraordinary." As if on cue, Mkuu dipped his trunk into the puddle and lifted it high, creating a sparkling shower of droplets that caught the emerging sunlight. Jabari immediately responded, mirroring his father's movement with remarkable precision. The two bulls began a water play session that seemed to combine remembered patterns from their past with new, collaborative elements. "The vocalization patterns are fascinating," came another update. "They're producing harmonized rumbles that suggest both memory recall and active learning. The frequency matching is unprecedented in our records." The surrounding herd had drawn closer, particularly the younger elephants, who watched the water play with obvious fascination. Some began to mimic the trunk movements, creating their own variations of the father-son water dance. "Document every aspect of this knowledge transfer," Dr. Kimoto instructed. "What we're witnessing is more than just play. It's an active transmission of cultural behavior across multiple generations." James continued shooting as Mkuu and Jabari's water play evolved into something more complex. They began taking turns leading and following, each adding new elements to their shared performance. The puddle had become a stage for their renewed relationship, each splash and spray telling part of their story of separation and reunion. "The behavioral integration is remarkable," Maya observed. "They're not just remembering old patterns, they're creating new ones together, building on their shared past to develop something entirely unique." The morning sun had now fully emerged from behind the storm clouds, creating a rainbow that arched across the savannah. Beneath this natural spectacle, father and son continued their water play, their joy evident in every movement and rumble. Through his lens, James captured each precious moment, knowing that what they were witnessing was more than just a scientific observation. It was a testament to the enduring power of family bonds and the incredible capacity of elephants to remember, learn and love across time and distance. As the morning progressed, the water play session gradually transformed into something even more remarkable. Mkuu began guiding Jabari away from the puddle and toward a different area of the sanctuary, one that held particular significance in the shared history. "All teams, adjust positions," Dr. Kimoto instructed through the communication system. "They're moving toward the eastern sector. Historical records indicate this was a significant feeding ground 40 years ago." James quickly gathered his equipment, his heart racing with anticipation. Through decades of observation, he knew that elephant feeding grounds often served as important sites for social bonding and knowledge transfer. The fact that Mkuu was leading Jabari to this specific location couldn't be coincidental. "Maya," he whispered as they carefully repositioned their blind, "pull up the archived data from 1984. There should be detailed documentation about their feeding patterns in this area." The young researcher nodded, her fingers flying across her tablet. "According to your notes, this was where Mkuu taught Jabari about specific medicinal plants. The maternal herd still uses some of these feeding routes today." Through his viewfinder, James watched as father and son approached a cluster of vegetation that had survived both time and the recent storm. Mkuu's movements became more deliberate, his trunk exploring the foliage with obvious purpose. Remarkable plant selection behavior emerging, Dr. Kimoto reported. The elder bull is demonstrating exactly the same feeding patterns documented in the historical records. Hormone levels suggest this is an active teaching moment. Jabari observed his father intently, his own trunk moving in curious exploration of the plants before them. What followed was an extraordinary display of knowledge transmission that left the research team speechless. "Look at the sequence," Maya whispered excitedly. Maku is showing him exactly which parts of each plant to select. It's the same medicinal feeding behavior you documented when Jabari was a calf. The elder bull was methodically demonstrating a complex series of plant selection and processing movements. He would carefully strip certain leaves, avoid others, and show specific ways of extracting maximum nutritional value from each chosen plant. Multiple observation posts reporting synchronized learning behavior throughout the herd came another update. The younger elephants are adopting these feeding patterns in real time. This is becoming a multi-generational knowledge transfer event. James captured every detail as Jabari began to mirror his father's movements, his trunk working with increasing confidence as ancient memories seemed to surface. The middle-aged bull would occasionally pause, as if confirming a half-remembered lesson from his youth. Their biological markers are fascinating, Dr. Kimoto noted. Both subjects are showing elevated levels of cognitive engagement. This isn't just routine feeding behavior. They're actively engaged in a complex learning exchange. The surrounding herd had begun to participate in their own way, with older females guiding younger members to specific plants and demonstrating proper feeding techniques. The entire scene had transformed into a remarkable display of elephant culture being passed down through generations. "Document the spatial patterns," Maya called softly into her headset. "The way they're moving through the feeding ground, it's creating almost exactly the same geometric patterns you mapped in your original study." James nodded, his camera capturing the beautiful symmetry of their movements. Maku and Jabari had fallen into a natural rhythm, their bodies swaying in unconscious synchronization as they moved from plant to plant. Their trunks would often touch, sharing scent information about particular vegetation. "Extraordinary scent-sharing behavior detected," came another update. The chemical analysis suggests they're not just identifying plants, they're creating a shared olfactory map of the feeding ground. The morning sun had risen higher, casting clear light on the feeding lesson unfolding before them. Through his lens, James watched as Maku demonstrated a particularly complex technique for extracting bark from a medicinal tree, a process that required both strength and delicacy. The level of detail in this knowledge transfer is unprecedented, Dr. Kimoto observed. "We're seeing evidence of both procedural and declarative memory spanning a 40-year gap. The implications for our understanding of elephant cognition are extraordinary." Jabari's response to his father's teaching was equally remarkable. The younger bull would not only mimic the techniques being shown, but would then demonstrate them to nearby younger elephants, creating a cascade of learning throughout the herd. "It's like watching the pages of an ancient book being reopened," Maya whispered, her voice filled with wonder. "Each movement, each careful selection of plants, it's all part of their shared story, their cultural heritage." James continued, documenting as father and son moved through the feeding ground, their interaction becoming more fluid and natural with each passing moment. What had started as a demonstration had evolved into a collaborative exploration, with both bulls sharing their knowledge and experience. Through his viewfinder, he captured the subtle expressions of recognition and joy that passed between them as they rediscovered this shared aspect of their relationship. It was another powerful reminder that their bond transcended the 40 years of separation, rooted in something deeper than time could erase. The peaceful feeding session was suddenly interrupted by an unexpected sound that carried across the savannah, the distant but distinct rumble of vehicles approaching. The noise signaled the arrival of the day's first tourist groups to the sanctuary, bringing a new challenge to the delicate reunion unfolding before them. Multiple safari vehicles detected approaching from the south, Dr. Kimoto reported through the communication system. All teams maintain position. This could be a crucial test of their bonding stability under external pressure. James watched through his lens as both Maku and Jabari's ears flared at the sound, their bodies tensing slightly in response to the potential intrusion. But what happened next demonstrated yet another extraordinary aspect of their reformed relationship. "Maya," James whispered, "are you documenting this? Look at their positioning. It's exactly like the protective formation they used to take when vehicles approached during Jabari's infancy." The young researcher nodded eagerly, her fingers flying across her tablet. "The spatial arrangement is identical to your 1984 documentation, but there's something different in their response pattern." Indeed, rather than showing signs of stress or aggression, Maku and Jabari had begun what appeared to be a coordinated series of movements. The elder bull took the lead, demonstrating to his son a calm yet alert posture that seemed designed to both protect the herd and allow for safe tourist observation. "Remarkable adaptation behavior emerging," Dr. Kimoto noted. "Both subjects are displaying advanced human interaction protocols. The knowledge transfer appears to extend to modern sanctuary conditions." Through his viewfinder, James captured the beautiful synchronization of father and son as they guided their extended family into a formation that balanced safety with visibility. It was a perfect example of how elephant wisdom could adapt to changing circumstances while maintaining core protective principles. "The hormone analysis is fascinating," came another update. "Despite the potential stressor, both bulls are maintaining stable stress markers. They're actually showing indicators of positive social engagement." The first safari vehicle appeared at the designated viewing distance, carrying excited tourists with cameras at the ready. Maku's response was remarkable. He gently guided Jabari into a position that would allow the visitors to observe them while maintaining a safe buffer zone for the herd. "Look at the teaching element," Maya observed quietly. "Maku isn't just showing Jabari how to handle the vehicles. He's demonstrating advanced tourism adaptation strategies. This goes beyond natural protective instincts." The surrounding herd responded to their leadership with remarkable trust, maintaining their calm feeding behavior while staying within the safety pattern established by the two bulls. Even Quito, the younger bull who had shown aggression earlier, was now mimicking their composed demeanor. Multiple learning behaviors documented throughout the herd, Dr. Kimoto reported. The younger elephants are adopting these human interaction protocols through direct observation. This is becoming another layer of generational knowledge transfer. James continued shooting as more safari vehicles arrived, each maintaining the prescribed distance. Through his lens, he watched as Maku and Jabari worked in perfect harmony, adjusting their positions slightly with each new arrival to ensure both herd safety and visitor satisfaction. "The vocalization patterns are extraordinary," came another update. "They're producing specific infrasonic communications that appear to be coordinating the herd's movement in relation to the vehicles. The complexity suggests advanced spatial awareness and group management." Maya's attention was fixed on her monitoring equipment. The biological markers indicate they're not just tolerating the human presence, they're actively engaging with it as a teaching opportunity. Look at how they're positioning the younger elephants to observe their interaction patterns. The morning sun had risen higher, creating perfect lighting conditions for the tourists' photographs. Maku and Jabari seemed to understand this instinctively, their movements becoming almost choreographed, as they demonstrated peaceful elephant behavior for their human audience. Document every aspect of this interaction, Dr. Kimoto instructed. What we're seeing here is more than just tolerance. It's active adaptation and teaching of human-elephant coexistence strategies. James watched as father and son occasionally exchanged trunk touches, seemingly reassuring each other and sharing information about their surrounding environment. Their ability to maintain their deep connection while managing external factors was a powerful testament to their reformed bond. The tourist vehicles are having an unexpected positive effect, Maya noted. Their presence is actually providing another context for Minku and Jabari to demonstrate their leadership abilities together. Through his viewfinder, James captured the subtle ways father and son communicated through trunk gestures and body positioning. Their years of separation forgotten as they worked together to protect and guide their extended family. It was a beautiful example of how elephant wisdom could bridge not only time, but also the growing intersection of wild spaces and human interaction. The morning continued to unfold as Maku and Jabari maintained their protective yet peaceful presence, their reformed bond growing stronger through each new challenge they faced together. Their remarkable reunion had become not just a story of remembrance, but one of adaptation, teaching, and the endless capacity of elephants to evolve while maintaining their deepest connections. As the tourist vehicles began to depart, leaving the sanctuary to its natural rhythm once more, something extraordinary caught James's attention. Minku had begun guiding Jabari toward a secluded area of the sanctuary that held particular significance, an ancient elephant graveyard that had been part of their original territory decades ago. All teams' priority shift, Dr. Kimoto's voice came through the communication system. They're moving toward the memorial grounds. This could be a crucial moment in understanding elephant memory and mourning behaviors. James felt a tightening in his chest as he recognized their destination. He had documented Mku and Jabari's visits to this sacred place in the past, watching how the elder bull would teach his young son about their ancestors through complex ritualistic behaviors. "Maya," he whispered, carefully repositioning his equipment, "pull up the historical data about their graveyard visits. There should be detailed documentation from '84 about specific behavioral patterns." The young researcher nodded, her expression serious as she accessed the archived information. "According to your notes, Maku had a distinct ceremony he would perform here, especially around the remains of his own mother, Jabari's grandmother." Through his lens, James watched as father and son approached the solemn grounds. The area was marked by scattered bones that had been carefully preserved by generations of elephants, each telling its own story of life and loss in the African wilderness. "Remarkable shift in biochemical markers," came an update. Both subjects showing elevated levels of hormones associated with emotional memory and mourning behavior. The patterns suggest deep recognition of the site's significance. Maku moved with deliberate steps, his trunk gently touching specific bones and artifacts as he led his son through the sacred space. What followed was an extraordinary display of elephant culture that left the research team in reverent silence. "Look at the precision of his movement patterns," Maya whispered, her voice filled with awe. "He's following exactly the same route documented in your original studies. The spatial memory is incredible." James captured every moment as Maku began demonstrating a series of ritualistic behaviors, gentle trunk touches, soft rumbles, and specific movements around particular remains. Jabari watched intently before beginning to mirror his father's actions, his own trunk moving with increasing confidence as ancient memories seemed to surface. Multiple observation posts reporting synchronized mourning behaviors. Dr. Kimoto noted, "The herd is responding to their lead, maintaining a respectful distance while displaying their own recognition patterns." The morning sun cast long shadows across the memorial grounds as father and son engaged in their ancient ceremony. Their movements were perfectly coordinated, creating a beautiful and solemn dance of remembrance that spoke to the depth of elephant cultural memory. "The vocalization analysis is extraordinary," came another update. "They're producing specific frequency patterns that match recordings from 40 years ago. These appear to be traditional morning calls passed down through generations." Maya's fingers flew across her tablet as she documented every detail. "The younger elephants in the herd are showing learning behaviors," she observed quietly. "They're absorbing these cultural practices in real time." Through his viewfinder, James watched as Mkuu guided Jabari to a specific location, the resting place of their family matriarch. The elder bull began a series of gentle trunk movements, touching specific bones in a particular sequence that James recognized from his earliest documentation. "The level of recall is unprecedented," Dr. Kimoto reported. "We're seeing evidence of multi-generational memory transmission that spans well beyond the 40-year separation. This challenges everything we thought we knew about elephant cultural preservation." Jabari's response to his father's teaching was profound. The younger bull not only mimicked the ceremonial movements, but began adding his own elements, creating a beautiful blend of remembered tradition and personal expression. "Their biological markers are showing fascinating patterns," came another update. "This isn't just learned behavior. They're experiencing deep emotional engagement with these memories and rituals." The surrounding herd had formed a protective circle around the sacred space, their own trunks raised in what researchers recognized as a gesture of respect and remembrance. Even the youngest calves seemed to sense the solemnity of the moment, their usual playfulness replaced by quiet observation. "Document every aspect of this knowledge transfer," Dr. Kimoto instructed. "What we're witnessing here goes beyond simple behavior patterns. This is the active transmission of cultural heritage across time and separation." James continued shooting as father and son moved through their ceremonial patterns, their bodies swaying in unconscious synchronization as they honored their ancestors together. Each movement, each gentle touch of trunk to bone, seemed to strengthen their reconnection while deepening their shared understanding of their family's history. Through his lens, he captured the profound beauty of this moment. 2 generations, bridging 40 years of separation through ancient rituals of remembrance and respect. It was yet another powerful reminder that elephant culture ran deeper than time, preserved in memories that even decades apart couldn't erase. The solemn atmosphere of the memorial grounds was suddenly transformed as Mkuu initiated what appeared to be the final phase of their reunion ritual. The elder bull let out a series of low, melodic rumbles that resonated across the sanctuary, calling the entire herd to attention. "All teams, prepare for documentation priority," Dr. Kimoto's voice crackled through the communication system. "The vocalizations suggest we're entering a significant social bonding phase. These are ceremonial calls we've never fully recorded before." James adjusted his camera settings as he watched Mkuu guide Jabari to an open space between the memorial grounds and the ancient baobab tree. The location seemed deliberately chosen, bridging the space between past and present, between memory and new beginnings. "Maya," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "are you seeing the positioning? They're creating a perfect circle with the herd, just like the bonding ceremonies I documented in the early years." The young researcher nodded eagerly, her fingers flying across her tablet. "The spatial arrangement is remarkably similar to your 1984 recordings, but there's something more complex emerging in the pattern. Through his lens, James captured the extraordinary scene as Makuu and Jabari began what could only be described as a ceremonial dance. Their movements were perfectly synchronized, their massive forms moving with a grace that seemed impossible for creatures of their size. Multiple biological markers indicating peak emotional engagement, came another update. Both subjects are showing unprecedented levels of oxytocin and other bonding hormones. This appears to be a culmination event. The surrounding herd had formed concentric circles around the father and son, with the older females positioning themselves at specific points that seemed to hold special significance. Even Keto, the once aggressive young bull, had found his place in the formation. The geometric patterns are fascinating, Maya observed quietly. Look at how they're using the morning shadows to create perfect alignments with the baobab tree and the memorial grounds. This isn't random, it's choreographed. Makuu's rumbles had evolved into a more complex series of vocalizations, which Jabari began to mirror with remarkable precision. The harmonic convergence of their calls created an otherworldly symphony that seemed to touch something primitive and profound in everyone present. Recording unprecedented vocal harmonics, Dr. Kimoto reported. The frequency patterns suggest they're creating a new form of communication that combines their individual experiences. This goes beyond anything we've documented in elephant behavior. James watched through his viewfinder as father and son engaged in an elaborate series of trunk interactions, each movement seeming to represent a different aspect of their shared history. It was as if they were physically reconstructing their bond, weaving together old memories with new understanding. The herd's response is extraordinary, came another update. They're producing supporting vocalizations that enhance the harmonic structure. This is becoming a community affirmation of their reunion. Maya's attention was divided between her monitoring equipment and the unfolding ceremony. The younger elephants are learning these patterns in real time, she noted. They're not just witnessing a reunion, they're absorbing a new layer of their cultural heritage. The morning sun had reached its zenith, casting perfect light on the ceremonial gathering. Makuu and Jabari's movements had become more fluid, more confident, as if each moment strengthened their reconnection and deepened their understanding of each other. Document every aspect of this ritual, Dr. Kimoto instructed. What we're seeing here is the creation of new elephant cultural practices built on the foundation of ancient memory. Through his lens, James captured the subtle ways father and son acknowledged each member of the herd, their trunks reaching out in gentle touches that seemed to express gratitude for the community's support of their reunion. It was a beautiful demonstration of how individual bonds strengthened the entire family group. The vocalization patterns are evolving, Maya observed. They're creating what appears to be a new form of familial call, something that combines Makuu's traditional signals with Jabari's learned variations. The ceremony continued to unfold as the two bulls moved in perfect harmony, their bodies creating shadows that danced across the savannah. Each movement seemed to carry meaning, each gesture part of a larger story they were telling together. Biochemical analysis confirms peak emotional engagement, came another update. This ceremony appears to be permanently altering their neurological patterns. They're literally rebuilding their neural pathways to accommodate their renewed bond. James felt privileged to document this extraordinary moment, a culmination of 40 years of separation transformed into a celebration of reunion and renewal. Through his viewfinder, he watched as father and son continued their dance, their movements telling a story of loss, perseverance, and the enduring power of family bonds. The morning air was filled with the gentle rumbles of the entire herd, their voices joining in a chorus that seemed to celebrate not just Makuu and Jabari's reunion, but the eternal cycle of separation and return, of loss and rediscovery that marked all life in the African wilderness. As the ceremonial dance drew to its natural conclusion, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the savannah, marking the final chapter of this extraordinary reunion. Makou and Jabari stood side by side beneath the ancient baobab tree, their massive forms silhouetted against the golden African sky, a living testimony to the power of bonds that transcend time. Final documentation phase, Dr. Kimoto's voice came softly through the communication system. What we've witnessed today will revolutionize our understanding of elephant cognition and emotional memory. James adjusted his camera one last time, determined to capture these precious final moments. Through his viewfinder, he watched as father and son engaged in one last intimate interaction, their trunks intertwined in a gesture that seemed to seal their renewed connection. "Maya," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "make sure we're recording every aspect of these final behaviors. The way they're positioning themselves, it's almost like they're creating a physical memory to carry forward." The young researcher nodded, her fingers moving across her tablet with practiced precision. Their biological markers are showing something remarkable, a perfect synchronization of heart rates and breathing patterns. It's as if they've achieved complete emotional harmony. Through his lens, James captured the gentle way Makou and Jabari began to share food items, taking turns offering choice bits to each other, a behavior that elephant researchers recognized as one of the highest forms of trust and bonding within their social structure. "Terminal phase bonding behaviors emerging," came another update. "The hormone analysis suggests they've established a permanent neural connection. Their separation has been fully bridged at both the emotional and physiological level." The surrounding herd had maintained their protective circle, but now the younger elephants were being permitted to approach closer, as if Makou and Jabari were ready to share their renewed bond with the next generation. The scene was becoming a beautiful demonstration of how elephant family connections rippled outward to strengthen the entire community. "Look at how they're integrating the younger ones," Maya observed quietly. "They're not just celebrating their own reunion anymore. They're using it as a teaching moment for the entire herd." James watched as father and son began a series of gentle movements that seemed to incorporate elements from every phase of their reunion. The playful trunk gestures, the protected weather responses, the solemn memorial rituals, all woven together into a final display of their reconstructed relationship. "The vocalization patterns are extraordinary," Dr. Kimoto noted. "They've developed a completely new form of communication that combines their individual experiences. This is unprecedented in our research." The afternoon light had taken on a magical quality, filtering through the baobab's branches to create patterns on the ground that seemed to dance with Makou and Jabari's movements. Even the dust motes in the air appeared to shimmer with the significance of the moment, biological markers indicating permanent bonding establishment, came another update. "What we're seeing is the final consolidation of their renewed relationship. The 40-year gap has been completely bridged." Maya's attention was fixed on her monitoring equipment, but her expression showed she was moved by more than just the scientific data. "It's like watching the closing of a circle," she whispered. "Everything they've experienced today, the recognition, the play, the protection, the mourning, it's all coming together in this final moment." Through his viewfinder, James captured the subtle ways father and son acknowledged each other and their extended family. Their movements had taken on a quality of absolute certainty, as if their reunion had awakened something timeless and unshakable within them. "All teams maintain final documentation protocols," Dr. Kimoto instructed. "What we're witnessing here isn't just the end of a reunion, it's the beginning of a new chapter in elephant social dynamics." The sanctuary had fallen into a reverent silence, broken only by the soft rumbles of contentment from the assembled herd. Even the ever-present African birds seemed to have quieted their calls, as if nature itself was acknowledging the significance of this moment. James touched the old photograph in his pocket one last time, knowing that while it had captured the beginning of Maku and Jabari's story, what he had documented today was something far more profound, a testament to the enduring power of family, bonds, and the incredible capacity of elephants to remember, love, and rebuild connections that even time couldn't truly break. As the sun began its final descent, casting the savannah in shades of gold and amber, father and son stood together beneath the ancient baobab tree, their silhouettes merging into one shadow on the African soil. Their story had come full circle, their separation healed by the timeless power of memory and love, offering hope and wonder to all who were privileged to witness their extraordinary reunion. "Do you think elephants feel emotions the way we do?" Maya asked softly, her eyes still fixed on the magnificent pair. James lowered his camera, a gentle smile crossing his weathered face. "After what we've witnessed today," he replied, "I'd say they feel them even more deeply. Some bonds truly are forever." The afternoon wind carried their words away across the savannah, where they merged with the gentle rumbles of Maku and Jabari, father and son, separated by time but reunited by a love that had never truly faded, their story now forever part of the endless cycle of life in the African wilderness. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.